Hello and welcome to another episode of SoFly. It is the end of August, and it's a new episode we're recording right here back on the old studio, I guess we could say. We're online, but it feels like a studio now. We've got myself, Mitch, we've got Yilma.
Hello, everyone.
And we've got Aldo.
Hey, everybody.
And we're very excited to be joined by a guest that we have on the show today. We've got Derek Bird, who is the founding editor of Fly Fusion magazine. He's worked with Fly Fusion since its inception and played an integral role in establishing the magazine's unique vision. On a practical level, he writes the Streamlines column for each issue and oversees acquisition of editorial content. Along with writing and editing, he also co-hosts the popular Fly Fusion series and is the producer responsible for content acquisition for the IF4, if you've heard of it, the International Fly Fishing Film Festival. Although he juggles his hectic schedule, he still finds time to do what he enjoys more than anything else in life, which is spending time with his wife and his two sons exploring the secluded streams nestled within British Columbia's Rocky Mountains. He's also got a brand new book out that we're going to talk about today called Last Summer on the Stage, and today he's on SoFly. Derek, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much. I've been looking forward to this. I just listened to a few of you guys' podcasts and listening to your interactions, man. I'm like, I hope I can just keep up with you guys. It's like, between like sneezing and laughing and
yeah, there'll be probably a couple of Yoma's iconic sneeze moments. Will there not? No, we're super stoked to be chatting too, and thanks so much for coming on. I mean, we've been following Fly Fusion for years on the I4. You know, like it's we're no stranger to that stuff at all.
Yeah, well, that's awesome.
I think it's always something as Canadian fly nerds that growing up fly fishing anyway in Canada, you're like, when you see content creators, I guess that term wasn't coined back then, but when you see Fly Fishing magazine or even the new Fly Fisher or something, you're like, wow, you start seeing your community, even a Canadian community, reflected in media. It's always super cool. So it'll be I'm pretty excited to chat about that and the book and everything. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, and I like the way that you put it, like content creators, because you're right, like that terminology wasn't around kind of back in our inception, which was kind of early, like really early 2000s, I think 2000 maybe 2 or something like that, 2003. Mm-hmm. And it's like, and everything's so much more immediate nowadays, right? Like back when we first started the magazine, it was like, you feel like you're in a bit of a silo when you're a writer and, doing kind of magazine work, because, for somebody to contact you, they have to like actually like find your email address kind of in the magazine and then like email you something. So when you get an email from somebody that they were either really, really angry or really, really happy, right? Like it's not just kind of a thumbs up type thing. So anyways, yeah.
No, it's awesome. Yeah. I mean, although I echo that, like Fly Fusion, I remember like going out of Green Drake in Ottawa and picking up copies of that stuff when I was like a teenager, man. So I was like, it was cool to read.
Where I worked.
Yeah, and Aldo worked there. It was like, but we didn't know each other, but it's a whole thing.
Yeah.
But it was cool to read, like Rick Warwood and like these people like that were, in the community writing articles. And it was like, Fly Fusion was like, I think it might have been my favorite magazine. Like it was just a beautiful thing, at that time. So
that's awesome. And you just totally did a throwback, like Rick Warwood, man. He's a gem, that guy. Like the way he could cast and like the stuff he'd write about, it's just off the charts. Like there was a segment, and not to nerd out, but you threw the word fly nerd out there, although so I'm going to carry on with it, man.
We're fly nerds. For
sure.
Not
to nerd out, but like there was like, and not to name kind of companies and stuff, because I don't want to make everybody upset and stuff, but there was like a contingent of guys back in the early 2000s that were part of like this G Loomis crew that like they were just like, you want to talk about like kind of the forefront or like the wave of like dissecting every single aspect of a cast down to its like finest minutia. Like those were the guys, man. And they would, and like to go and like see them at a trade show or to hear them like, teaching a session or something. Oh my goodness. Like they could talk for hours and hours and hours about like, say, drift in a cast or like stop points or something like that. And you're just like, oh my goodness, you could just sit and kind of drink from a fire hose. And back then, right, that's kind of like, information wasn't as kind of instant as it is today. And so like to show up in a place and hear one of those guys, or to have one of them kind of write in the magazine, or you know, to interview one of them and be like a ghostwriter for them or something like that. That was pretty cool for somebody like me, kind of in my younger years, where it was like, oh my goodness, I'm learning so much right now, right? So yeah.
For correct me if I'm wrong, but like, was that the crew that kind of in the, like you said, early 2000s, or like, you know, in the 2006 to 10 era, were they the ones putting on those like spay claves? Because I remember going to some spay claves, and I think it was like the brand sponsored by G Loomis. And I remember going, to echo your point, I remember going to them and being like, I've never heard somebody talk about, except for maybe Lefty Cray in a magazine or on a video, talk about casting this way. But
those are those are the guys, man. Like, it was Rick Warwood. I was going to say Stevie Winwood, but that's a singer, I think.
Oh, Steve Winwood. I love Steve Winwood.
Yeah.
He's the best.
There was like Chris Sepio, he was in there. And then there was a few brothers that were just like kind of long distance champs, as far as like, it was Steve and the Rage F boys, right? They were just like, you know, bombing out these like monster casts and kind of dissecting everything. And then a lot went into kind of their design of rods, right? Like with Steve, with G Loomis, and then Tim Rage F with Echo, like with the Echo rods and stuff like that. Like those guys, they were kind of heart and soul, and like kind of gave everything to fly fishing, and kind of invested a lot, and came out with like just some fabulous rods, right? Just some absolute. And again, I'm not sponsored by anybody. I'm not like, we're just kind of reminiscing right now. And I feel like I have to say that, because there's so many companies that put out really good rods right now, right? Like we do a rod review. Every year we do, in our winter issue, I think it is, we do a rod review. And man, to be able to like test kind of all the new rods that come out and test them like side by side, like we live in an absolutely just amazing time as far as technology that goes into rods, and being able to like, you know, being somebody that's able to go to different rod manufacturers and see where they're manufactured, and meet the minds that are behind kind of like what's going into our rod technology. It's pretty impressive. And you know, and it's like, if you want to like spend a ton of money on a rod, like, you know, if you're out kind of in the $1,000 range or a little above that, I mean, you can have your choice. Like, there's a number of different companies that'll have that. But then even if you're in the mid range too, like, you're still going to get really good quality fine casting rods. Maybe the components won't be as high end, but boy, they're sure good rods. And then and this is fantastic too, right? Even in the lower or entry range.
Oh yeah. There's some
you know, the rods that are coming out in the entry range too are like, they're pretty slick casting, right? For somebody that's like, well, I don't know if I like for sure want to get in, or my budget doesn't allow for this. Like, man, you can still get some absolutely like quality stuff, right? Even in the entry range. So anyways,
fly fishing boomed, you know, like, it was really cool, but it's kind of around that time, right? I mean, well, this probably will come out of the next few questions. I think maybe like, you know, first, I think before we get into like the Fly Fusion, the book, and all that stuff, like, why don't we kind of go back and talk about how you got into fly fishing and like where it started for you? How'd you get into fishing at all? When did it all begin?
Wow, yeah. I kind of.
And where are you right now in the world?
That's a good question. I'm actually I'm on. So I live on Vancouver Island.
Okay.
Yeah. Kind of the like the writing place, or kind of writing central for like Roderick Haig Brown's stuff, right? I don't know if you guys are familiar with him, but he kind of popularized the area on Vancouver Island that I live. But so I've been on Vancouver Island for probably a better part of 20 years. But I grew up in the Kootenays, so in the Rockies, like kind of southeast British Columbia, which when I was growing up, it was completely undiscovered, right? So most of kind of what I did there was like, you know, I'd go out on what are considered popular streams today that likely people have heard of. And I'd go out kind of with my buddies and fish all day and never see anybody out there, right? And so that was kind of a huge, like, you know, a huge way to, I don't know, it was just a really incredible way to grow up, is kind of like, so I always say that me getting into fly fishing, it's in my blood, because, like, you know, my dad fly fished, and he would, you know, it was always my favorite thing when he'd like pull out the topographical maps. You guys might be a little bit too young to understand what a topographical map is, but he'd pull out. You're like, I know that.
We had this going back to the Green Drake Outfitters phase of my life. When I was 16, we had like the New York, upstate New York road map and topo map.
Yeah,
and we were like, people who listen to the show, they hear this reference all the time, so I apologize. But anyway, whatever. Like, that's where we went to trout fish. We just didn't have trout streams in Ottawa.
Oh, okay,
and so
yeah.
it was just like, it was a topo map fiesta.
Yeah.
So not that young.
Okay, well,
love
yeah,
the
you
topo
look
maps.
young, man. So
It's so fun looking at those old maps and like, you know,
I
seeing
loved-
where
yeah.
fish might be, you know. Yeah, it's a great
right. I
exploration.
absolutely loved looking at them. And my dad, he'd pull them out. He'd put them out on the, you know, on the dinner table type thing, and he'd be like, "Okay, boys, you know this," and then he'd point to where we were going, and I would just like literally, I would dream about that, right? Even though I'd never seen the actual place, I would like dream about it the night before we were going. I was so excited, and so yeah, it's partly in the blood, partly geography. Like, just if you didn't, you know, basically if you didn't grow up, you know, hunting or fishing or like, you know, doing something really outdoorsy in the Kootenays, then you kind of wasted your kind of existence there in a way, because it invited all of that, right? So growing up, it was, you know, at first, and you guys would probably identify with this if you grew up as like anglers or fly anglers, it was very much like expand your territory, right? So my parents were very much like in the 80s, they were very much free range parenting, right? So they weren't kind of the helicopter parents. They were like very much like, you know what? Oh, you're 11 years old or 12 years old right now. And they would let us like ride our bikes, you know, 5 kilometers to like the closest lake. We'd tie our fly rods onto our bikes with binder twine. We'd ride to the lake. We'd fish for the whole day, right? We wouldn't have like sunscreen or water or anything like food or anything like that, because we're just there to fish, and that's all you think about like when you're a kid who loves fishing, right? So we'd just go there and fish for the day, and then the range would continue to expand. So it was that lake at first, and then it became, you know, and then it became kind of, there was a river that was about kind of 10 to 15 kilometers from kind of my doorstep. And then, so we'd ride our bikes like before, like kind of around 15, we'd ride our bikes out to the river and spend the day out there. And, you know, we'd push boundaries as, you know, as kind of young teens, right? Like trying to figure out like what we could wade. And, you know, we'd often learn the hard way that we couldn't wade something, right? And so, and, you know, we survived through all of that. But that's what it was. And then it just kind of kept getting like the territory kept expanding. You know, when my buddies we all fly fish, and when we got our driver's licenses, then it was like when we weren't working, we knew what we were doing, right? We were driving out to this river or that river that we couldn't get to when we were kids, but now we can. And so it's like the most exciting thing in the world, right? But yeah, so that's kind of where I grew up. Like I'm a Rocky Mountain Trench boy, which is like, you know, I grew up between like the Columbia Range and the Columbia Mountain Range and the Rocky Mountain Range. There's a big, huge, like 1,500 kilometer trench that like divides BC, basically, and that's where I grew up. And it was just trout central, lots of west slopes. And there was this one guy, I won't rabbit trail too much, but there was this one guy who was like, he said to my dad, he was one of my dad's buddies, and he knew that I loved fly fishing. And I was probably in my like kind of 16, 17 at the time, and I'd fished for kind of these west slope cutthroat, like kind of my whole life to that point. And he said to me one day, he said, you know, it's not just cutthroat in the river. He said, like, I was at this one river the other day and I caught like this, you know, 12-pound bull trout. And I'm like, what? Like, what's a bull trout? Like, I didn't even know, right? Because back then, again, it was like, you know, you were at the mercy of kind of like reading, like just, you know, if you were into fly fishing, you could go and talk to the shops. The shops were sometimes a little bit tight-lipped. Or you could buy a magazine that was usually, mostly out of the States. Yeah, it was American, and so there wasn't really talk of, you know, that type of fishing. And so so when he told me that, I was like right at my buddy's doorstep, you know, kind of right after that, saying, "Did you know this?" And he was like, "No." And so then it was like kind of like a couple of years of us trying to figure out how to fish for these, you know, these kind of fabled like
Yeah,
12,
elusive
13, 14, 15 pound fish, right? And we started to catch them, and which was so crazy because it was like all those years that we could have caught them that we didn't even know they were there, right? And so I don't know, but that's one of the things that makes fly fishing what it is, right? Is when you get like that little tidbit of information, and then you're like, oh, what am I going to do with this now, right? And that's like, and I still get that, you know, I'm kind of halfway through my existence if I live to 100. And I'm still like, I'll get this little tidbit of information, or I'm excited to talk to you. I was excited to talk to you guys today because, you know, because there's lots of stuff that cross pollinates, right? Where, you know, you try something out there, and I've done this, you know, maybe not kind of where you guys fish, but I've done this in a few different places now, just going and testing out different rods with different manufacturers in different places and stuff, where I'll try something kind of in their neck of the woods, and I'll be like, hey, I bet you that works for this, right? And then I'll do it, and it will, and I'll be like, I'll feel a little bit accomplished or something, right? Because I'm like, absolutely. Oh, I might be the only person like on Vancouver Island right now that's trying this, right?
Right.
Yeah. That's cool. That's really cool.
That's definitely a very gratifying thing, and I think I've done that before with the bonefish. Remember, although we were using the the clousers, because I'm so used to using clousers on other for walleye, for bass, and then we just we went to Mexico one time, and you can use pink clousers for this, and it just felt so good because I always thought fishing for bonefish was the shrimp had to be exactly what they were eating at the time, and it was very more right. But it wasn't
it was like you were fishing smallmouth bass on like whatever,
pretty much. Yeah, exactly.
Bonefish.
Yeah. It was a really similar scenario to catching smallmouth bass. Yeah. you look for the lily pads.
Yeah.
You cast the lily pads, and that's where they
put a pop.
No, but you're right. You'll like. Yeah, exactly. Dahlberg diver. No, I know what you mean. Yeah, Yelma totally. Yeah, I was surprised that worked, but that's all they were eating.
Yeah.
And very cool.
And it is, and you feel like not just a little bit accomplished, but kind of like you've. I don't know, you've short-circuited some process or something, right? By like going, oh yeah, well I use clousers over here for this, and what? Like I don't have to, retie my whole box. I can use a clouser over here for this too, right?
Yes.
Like that's
it's like you hacked.
Yeah. There's and there's one fly that that I've fished. I use tons of different flies, but there's one that I was using.
I thought you were just about to tell us like the ultimate.
Yeah, I'm just like I just use one fly for everything. I just have one
What's the fly
in my box, and that's it. It's not because it works; it's just because I'm lazy. No.
Yeah.
No, there's this one fly that I was using for west slopes, and I was doing it kind of one summer, like because I go back and I fish in my home waters like every summer. I'll go back for like a week and.
Oh, that's awesome.
And just kind of connect with old friends and kind of some of my old buddies, right? And we'll fish together for a week, and then there was this one fly that they started using out there for west slopes, and I got back out to the island, and it was summer steelhead time, and I'm like, man, I wonder if I like skated this, if it would work for summer steelhead, and sure enough, it is dynamite for summer steelhead and for like coastal cutthroat, and it's like. And I've done it now for probably 4 or 5 years. I'm using that pattern like almost exclusively, like right at the start of the season, just because it's so money. And I don't want and I'm so hypocritical because I don't want to write about it, or I don't want it to I don't want to show anybody, when somebody walks past me on this stream. I'm like one of those guys where I like slide my hand up the handle so they can't see the fly. Like I'm like totally doing that, even though I'm like somebody that's like should be dispersing information. Hey, I got one on this fly. I just
Anybody who listens to the show has signed an NDA, so all good.
Right? Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Skating,
unwitting
cool.
Skating. That must be so much fun.
Oh, skating! Yeah, skating for like a summer run steelhead. There's kind of two fish that like when you skate for them. The visual is, and it's quite different, but the visual is like, it makes you, when you close your eyes at night. Have you guys ever done this when you, after pounding banks all day from a drift boat or something and watching kind of like fish come up for a fly? Like sometimes at night I'll close my eyes and that's what I'll see even before I've drifted off to sleep, right? Because I've done that motion so many times that day, right?
Yeah.
that like that's what I'll
Totally.
see.
Yeah.
But there's two fish out, or two types of fish out west here that like that are so visual when I'm casting to them, but it's in different ways. So one of them's a coho. And do you guys have coho in the like that come up into the Great Lakes?
Oh, yeah.
You do, right?
We do.
Oh,
we
so
do.
maybe we could talk too about kind of cross
I
pollination.
can't say
there.
we really. Yeah, maybe we can try something this season. I can honestly say we don't really fish for them.
Oh, okay.
We definitely
Yeah.
kind of stick to the Great Lakes steelhead thing.
Okay.
So not for any good reason other than like the GTA streams seem to get more Chinook salmon than anything.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So maybe the
it's-
Superior streams get more coho, but
and
yeah,
are they
we tend to get a lot of Chinooks.
okay? So with coho, like one thing that they'll do. So they're like chasers. Like out of all the Pacific salmon, anyways, they're the ones that to me, anyways, are like built for a fly rod, right? Like pinks are fun, but there's normally so many of them in the river, and there's so many people that show up to fish them. Sockeye, normally they're not like really into anything once they've entered the stream. They normally aren't really up for much of anything, pretty shy. Yeah. And yeah, you can, like, if you get the right size, depending on your gear, right? If you get the right size of Chinook, then you can land it. But, out on the island here, like, sometimes you'll be fishing for coho or something, you'll hook into like, a 30-pound, a 30-pound spring or Chinook, and you're like, well, in the current, if it's pretty fresh, there's if you're fishing an 8-weight rod, there's like, even with an 8-weight, right? Unless you're double handing it, then maybe on a double hand, you have a chance. But anyway, but I think that
fish.
coho, it's a big fish, especially in a current, right? Like, anyways, coho are like, to me, they're built for the fly because they'll chase, right? And so once you've cast, like, you just start like stripping that fly, and those coho, they'll, like, if they're in the stream and they're fresh, they're coming out of nowhere, right? Like, just to hammer that fly. And so, but then they'll take a dry too, which is really, really crazy.
Oh, wow.
That's cool.
And so especially if there's quite a few of them in the stream and they're really fresh, you can get them on something we call wogs, right? So where you'll be like stripping, and so you're stripping these big dries like across the surface, and then you'll just see like this V behind the fly, and then this mouth open, and thunk, and then you're on. And then coho are so visual that they're just kind of like bouncing and flying around everywhere, and they're aerial. And so there's that's like that's kind of like, oh, this is
Salivating
amazing,
over here.
right? Like, yeah. And then the steelhead too, like, kind of when you're swinging for steelhead, a lot of times you'll hear a like a really loud or a dense kind of like thunk, like under the fly, because they'll swirl under it, and they're usually like a pretty decent size, right? And so they'll swirl under it sometimes before they actually like take it, and so that's kind of like, that's cool. And then to like actually see their mouth come up and hit that fly, like to be able to catch basically a sea run kind of rainbow. It's like on a dry fly. I mean, come on, right? Like, is there anything that like?
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah, is there anything that like could rival that? Well, I suspect that there is, but anyways.
Well, I mean,
know
I
what
guess,
Yeah.
maybe in the salt or something. But I will tell you that Yilma and I are coming to Squamish October 5th.
Are you guys really?
So that just got us like, I was just like,
Hello.
na, 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 na.
Yeah,
like,
drooling.
like,
Yeah.
drooling, yeah.
So on the Squamish, you guys are fishing the Squamish, eh?
Yeah.
We don't know our itinerary yet. We're
okay.
doing some work with Fishing BC, but we're our really good friend Joel Clifton, who's an awesome photographer.
Yeah.
In Squamish, we've done a lot of work together. He lives there, and it's his kind of project with Fishing BC. So we're coming to do a podcast and kind of just be the talent and fish and hang out.
very
But
cool.
we're going to be in and around the Squamish area for
Nice.
5 days
Yeah.
and maybe longer.
Yeah.
But we're definitely there for 5 days. So you just got us.
Well, have fun with that, you guys, because I mean, like, there's going to be. I mean, in October, you're going to catch, and you've probably gone through all this already, but you'll be catching salmon. You'll likely be catching like some char, like dollies and stuff like that, and so it'll be And if you guys want, like, if you want to get a little bit of a trout fix, like at that time of year too, on coastal streams, you know, you can fish in behind some of the reds, and you know, when those eggs are coming up, and you can get trout too, and decent sized trout as well, right? Like they're usually like, you know, their bellies are usually quite distended at that time because they've been just snacking on all the eggs. But
Right.
I mean, it depends. It depends on how dirty you want to get, right? Because some people are like, some of the people that probably listen to your podcast are like, oh, he's talking eggs. Like I will just, you know, I will never speak to this man in my life.
Yeah.
But you know what? It's like when you grow up in an area where there's salmon, you kind of, you know, I fish dries whenever I can, and that's my preference. But I love fishing, and so sometimes I'll, you know, fish in behind the salmon, and I'm fishing when some of the dry fly snobs aren't. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking to people from Ontario, so
Mitch is a
we're,
dry man.
you know, we're no strangers for greasiness. But
I figured I was safe on your podcast to talk
Yeah.
about egg patterns.
I think like
Absolutely.
realistically as a baseline, I think all of us would like to catch every fish on a dry fly or a popper or a gurgler, a two-handed dry line, you know.
Yeah.
But sometimes you just want to catch a fish, and
Right.
you know, fish eat eggs and fish eat worms. So
Yeah, exactly, right? Like sometimes, and you know what? I'm embarrassed because like this, like I'm embarrassed that I even brought this up and that I voluntarily brought it up. I was just like walked myself into like the egg debate, right? Which out in BC, like it's, you know, you got to be really careful who you're talking to out in BC.
It's a real
Right.
thing out there. Yeah.
But like I was down in Montana a couple of years ago, and there was a bunch of us that were fishing with this one rod company. It was a kind of a media get together for a brand new rod release, and you know whenever you know that happens, it's like it's so great because you know that you know there's going to be a day of kind of like casting and checking out the rod and checking out the factory, but then they're going to put you on the water for a day or two with the rod too, right? And so that's like you're like, yes please, like I'm going down for that, right? Anyways, we were down in Montana, and we were at this one rod company, and there's like all these guys there that are like, you know, they're all media guys, and I was in this one boat, and the water was just like it had rained, and it was just like, it was not fishing well. It was way too high to fish well. And so the guide on our boat's like, he's like, I don't know, like, you know, do you want to get a little bit dirty? Like, do you want to go down with some eggs or something, or with some worms, and like with a San Juan or something? And I'm like, and I kind of like looked at the media guy in the back, like it was going to be which one of us is going to cave, right? It was like, who's going to say it first? And so I kind of looked at him, and he was kind of doing the no, that's like below me. And then I was kind of like, yeah, put one on for me. And so I did. So I fished with that for a bit.
right on.
Yeah. And I caught. And then when, you know, after I caught a few on that, I was like, you know what? Like, let's pound the banks. You know, the water's overflowing the banks. So let's like strip streamers off the banks and see if we can get some browns. And that happened. So that was good too.
That's fun.
I used a bait casting rod 2 days ago with my nephew, so I mean, hey, I got real dirty.
I don't
so.
even fly fish. I just use minnows and stuff.
It was his
It's like, now
decision.
this is confessional time, you guys.
Yeah.
That's what it is, right? Yeah.
You know what? Actually, none of us have ever been fly fishing.
Yeah.
No. But that's I love that kind of, you know, we just don't talk about BC that much because probably none of us have ever been there to fish anyway, and it's cool hearing about, you know,
Yeah, it's an awesome place to just like grow up fly
your
fishing.
background because it's obviously amazing.
I'm very excited. Very, very excited.
I'm like so excited for you guys to come out and fish the Squamish area. Like it's like, and likely because of because of who's bringing you out. You said like fly fishing BC, probably Matt or whatever his name. Yeah.
Matt.
Yeah, Matt. So, like you'll end up with, you know, like good guides, and they'll take you to places where there's not going to be very many people, and like you guys are going to just like, yeah, you guys are going to have a time. Like it'll be good. It'll be really good. And October, like you guys are going to be catching. You guys are going to be catching big fish. So.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, we budgeted some time for afterwards just to like, you know, have some time just to explore as well, and like because like I don't know the next time I'm going to get out there. So yeah, we're stoked.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
So,
staying
when
there
you
until
guys
the
get
17th.
Okay, nice. When you guys get to Squamish, you can kind of wave across the strait, like give me a wave across the strait, because I'm right across the strait from Squamish, so that's
Oh, right on.
like basically. Well, sorry, Victoria is probably more across the strait from Squamish, but Vancouver Island it's out there. It's out in the Pacific somewhere. We're floating around out there.
Nice.
It's awesome. Okay,
Just
sweet.
looking at some
That's
maps
an
there,
awesome fishy life. That's really fun. Where you grew up and where you are now. How did Fly Fusion? Like what started? How did that start? Where did that come?
Oh man, that's a really good question, Mitch. So the way that started out was there was no kind of like trade show in Western Canada, and my brother and my dad, there was a few people that approached them like kind of from the industry, and they're like, a trade show would do really well like in the Calgary area. And they're like, okay. And my dad had just he was retired at the time, and so they started a trade show. And my brother was like, well, maybe we should do like a trade magazine for the show. And then so he started to research that, and the more he researched, the more he's like, well, I think that there's room in Canada for like an actual like kind of like magazine. Like I think that there's space in Canada for that. And so he floated that idea by me one day, and he said, because he knew kind of like that like basically how I spend all my extra time was fly fishing, and then he knew that just from my educational background that I have my degrees are in communications and English literature, so he knew that I kind of knew how to dot I's and cross T's and put periods in the right spot, and so so anyways he said, do you want to join me with this and like edit it? And I'm like, yeah, sure, like let's do it. And so initially it was kind of like trying to find a name for it that would kind of like be different in the market, right? And so that's what we wanted. We wanted to kind of be different in the space where we saw kind of what everybody was doing, and we figured that we could do things a little bit differently. And so that's what we did. So I think it was kind of like 2002-ish or 2003-ish when that started. And I can remember, like, I think one of the coolest things, actually there was two cool things that happened right from the inception. One was coming up with a name, and that was like, so we had some different partners at the time. There's a couple of guys who had a television show that were partnering with us, and like I would like, we were all kind of like sending out names to each other, and you could always tell like how much people liked a name by how quickly they responded to your email. And so, if it took a few days, then you could tell that it was going to be like, let's keep going. Like casting creel is not really going to work, right? And and so I like
Cast and creel.
Yeah, I get that. It's actually what SoFly was going to be called too. So
right? I mean, it's like that's the default for everybody, right? So, anyways,
Cast and creel.
Yeah. So anyways, one night I was just kind of lying down, just about falling asleep, and I started going like, oh, I got to keep working at this, and so I kept thinking through it, and boom, I just started like fly fishing, and I was like, oh, Fly Fusion, like that kind of has a ring to it. So the next morning I got up, and I sent it off to everybody, and it was like within 10 minutes, everybody got back to me, and everybody's like, that's it, that's the name, right? And so.
Nice.
So then then it kind of things started to happen, and I can remember like the very first, and maybe you guys remember this like with your podcast, like when you first like the first person you contacted or whatever, the first person that maybe had some notoriety that you contacted. I can remember being like contact. It was my very first. I think it was my first interview that I was doing, or my first like call out to see if like I could get an article from somebody that actually had some credibility. It was his name was. I don't know if you guys know who this is, but he's one of our.
Wait.
Do it.
Yeah.
Oh,
Guess.
I'm kind of hoping it's the same for you and Mitch, because I think I know who it
Say
is
it.
for Mitch.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but go ahead.
Okay,
go. I'm curious.
so it was I called this fella, and I was like so nervous because I had read so much of his stuff and I respected him so much, and I like called him.
It's starting to feel.
It was
pretty good.
Brian Chan. It was
Brian
Brian Chan.
Nice.
Yeah, and who's like Stillwater, like the Stillwater guy,
The guru.
the guru,
Yeah.
right? And so I called him, and he answered the phone, which I was like, my heart was just racing, and I'm all, hello, is Brian Chan there? Like somebody else, like some other Brian was going to answer the phone, right?
Hi, Brian speaking.
Yeah, exactly.
Hi,
yeah.
is Brian there?
Is Brian-
Yeah, it's Brian. I love it.
So anyways, that was my first kind of like foray into like completely embarrassing myself and being like, you know what, Bird, like you got to get it together, right? If you're going to be like this person that's calling people, media people, and you gotta get it together. So anyways, yeah.
No, it's funny. I totally feel you, man. Like, it's, you got to start somewhere, right? You got to
Right,
start somewhere.
exactly.
I think it's safe to say John Gierak was our first, like, I don't want to insult any other guest, but like
No, of
in
course.
terms of like somebody we've all read,
Right.
for a while.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I remember when Mitch was like crafting the email and
Yeah,
like,
this
sending me
was-
drafts
yeah.
and stuff.
Yeah.
He's like, oh man, I hope he says yes. And then he did, which was even more nerve wracking.
yeah.
Like
We
calling
we
him in
rented,
Colorado,
we rented a studio.
Yeah.
like
in
a
downtown
like
Toronto.
Like
with
a-
an engineer,
Yeah.
and like
Tense. We're like,
Yeah.
everybody get there early. We got to do this thing right. And then we call
Yeah.
him, and he's like, hello? And we're like, hey, it's SoFly. He's like, oh, you guys are like 2 hours early. Like, we're like, mountain time. We're like, we called him on Eastern time. And that was the first time we were always like Eastern Standard Time.
Oh man, that's
It was
amazing.
he was so cool though. He was like,
but he did it. Anyway.
He was like, oh, you're lucky you caught me. I just got off fishing, but yeah, I can talk now.
Yeah.
It's fine.
And then when you guys were like interviewing, was the first part a little bit bumpy? Was it like a little bit kind of like hey, like were you kind of like starstruck a
on
little
us, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
He was like,
bit?
obviously.
Oh yeah,
just
no,
like,
yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah,
You know what I mean?
you
He's
guys,
like,
yeah.
shut up, and he just like talked.
Yeah,
It was
yeah,
awesome.
Yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, totally. Yeah, you're nervous. You're like, oh man, like I don't want to say something stupid that they hate, and they're like,
Right? Yeah, yeah.
idiot, and you're like, no, you know what I mean?
Idiot.
Yeah, pulling the Chris Farley. Are you guys old enough to know who Chris Farley is?
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Was it Brim
Yeah.
Brower? Was it that sketch where he was like the news guy? Anyways,
yeah.
that was
Yeah.
one of his lesser known sketches, right? Like everybody knew the
Van
the
down by the
guy,
river.
down by the river guy, but not
Yeah.
many people knew the Brim Brower guy. Anyway, idiot.
It was also
Felt like
the
that,
time
for
when
sure.
our phone calls weren't this. We didn't see the people
right.
we were
no.
calling.
Yeah.
So it was like you couldn't get a visual cue
Yeah.
off of somebody. You couldn't like read.
No.
yeah.
But for Garrett,
that would have been
So that the whole thing was
yeah,
funny.
no,
yeah.
yeah, you're
yeah,
right.
that would have been more nerve wracking for sure. Yeah.
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 But it's fun.
Yeah. But it's fun. Was it always like intentional when you started the magazine to be like CanCon, or were you like, we just need Canadian voices for the global community, or was it like we need to tell stories from Canada,
Right.
Or could it just be
Yeah, good question. Really good question. No, it was. So I think at first it was kind of like, well, we want to try to get our goal was, some of the stuff that we had set, like some of the visionary stuff that we had set was, we want to get the best of the best, right? Best of the best photographers and best of the best, writers. But when you're first starting out, not everybody's just kind of jumping on board with you, right? So it took a while. And so a lot of times who we'd end up working with would be, Canadians. But then after a while, we, there was kind of more and more American writers that we'd work with, or American photographers that we'd work with, especially for more high profile stuff like cover shots and stuff like that. There were, some very high profile Americans that we started to work with for that. And then kind of like we found that probably I'm thinking maybe 7 to 10 years into our existence, it started to you could actually start to feel it, where it was not us carrying it anymore, where it was you could feel there was a wave behind you that was kind of pushing the surfboard, right? To mix metaphors. I have surfed once. To mix kind of metaphors, right? Oh yeah, there you go.
You can't even see him. He's like camouflaged. That shirt.
Right?
I wore the bad shirt. I mean, I wore a great shirt. Yelmo designed it, but it's might be computing here.
Nice. So yeah, then you could start to feel it, and when we started to feel it, at trade shows, when people wanted to come and talk to you, and set up meetings with you, and when American writers wanted to write for you, and when American photographers wanted to get in on the action, that was you kind of felt like okay, this is this is happening. This is we're going in a direction, and let's kind of part of it was kind of like, let's hold on, but then part of it was like, okay, like let's kind of like renew the vision and kind of like see where this is going to take us, right? And so that was that was really exciting. And there was like, I think around that time too was kind of when, and this is all credit to my brother, like the guy's a marketing genius, and he's a risk taker too, right? I'm not a risk taker, but he's a risk taker. And so whenever you come up with like a good idea, like when we're having planning sessions with kind of our editors and stuff, when we come up with like a good idea, he's like, okay, let's make that happen, right? And so even if it's like, a huge cost or whatever, he's like, let's do that. And so there was like, that's when, when it became kind of like this, I call it kind of like a triangle of marketing genius where the magazine kind of fed into like the TV show, and the TV show kind of, did, we have like it's kind of a branch or associated with like the IF4, right? The International Fly Fishing Film Festival. And so it's kind of like this triangle of like, ways that we connect with the fly fishing community. And it just kind of like, it just did what it did. And it's been a really positive, fun experience for the most part. I mean, with anything, right? There's like the little details and stuff that aren't kind of like, that aren't like the glamorous or the fun parts or, that type of thing. But from the outside, like a lot of people are like, I told this story before, but I'll tell it once again, which is, not on your podcast. So you guys aren't going to be like, oh boy, now he's just repeating what he's saying. Like cut. So
well, I grew up in the Kootenays and fuck.
the old grandpa approach. So if I told you guys this, right? Like, and just start like repeating stories.
That'd be awesome. I'm down.
Yeah. But there was one guy, I was picking up my kid from school one day, and there was one guy who knew what I did, and he came over to me and he's like, man, I'm in between jobs right now. And like, I was talking to a job counselor and she was like, what do you want to do? And he was like, do you know Derek Bird? I want his job. Like, that's what I want to do. And I was just like, I'm like, oh, that's really cool. Because we see it like, fly fishing kind of media and stuff. We see it as, and maybe sometimes that's how we project it, right? Like, where you guys are like, you guys get to go to Squamish and like, go to a place that you've never fished before. And like, and sometimes that's what it is, right? And when it's that, you're just like, oh my goodness, like these are like kind of bucket list stuff that I'm getting to take part of, and I'm getting to share that kind of bucket list stuff with an audience that kind of like wants to eat that up, that'll likely go, oh my goodness, like I want to do what they're doing, or I'd like to be a part of what they're doing. And so that's, I don't know, it's pretty exciting, I think, like stuff like that anyways.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
It's so cool. It's so cool. It's so cool. When did the IF4 come to be? Like, how did you guys start that?
That's what I'm wondering.
Yeah.
I've been wondering that for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, just, came into the ether.
Yeah, right? Yeah. So I'm trying to think what year it started. So that's kind of a combination of like, that's like, you want to talk like east, west kind of like, amalgamation. So we worked a lot with Vantage Point Media House, and we've done that. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with Vantage Point, the Vantage Point guys. Like, just absolute like wizards and geniuses and ninjas behind like the camera. You guys anyways. So we did lots of work with them, both with the television series and with IF4. And so it was kind of like a brainchild of like, of kind of, we had kind of the means to do it, right?
Yeah.
With the work that we had done with Vantage Point, with Nick at Vantage Point. And so that was kind of like, I think it was kind of that. And then maybe to insert myself in something, because I think it was mainly my brother and Nick that kind of like spearheaded that. But maybe to insert myself a little bit and maybe give myself maybe too much credit. It was like, I can remember like probably in my, I don't know, I was in university at the time, and it was very much like, I loved skiing. Skiing doesn't love me as much and doesn't love my old body as much anymore, but I used to love like skiing, right? And so I used to go to like Warren Miller ski films like Steep and Deep, like back in the 90s, right? And it was just like, it was kind of like this community of like, you know, skiers getting together and kind of like, you know, you watching it and kind of like the off season and just going like, oh, just like drooling over these places that they'd ski and the narration of like Warren Miller. And it was just like, and I like one day I was like, and again, my brother, he's not somebody to sit on ideas. And, you know, so we'd had conversations like that, like, oh, wouldn't it be cool to like do some type of an event like a ski film event type thing, but for fly fishing and I mean, same thing with the TV show, right? TV show came about just by, I had just had surgery and I think I had like a week or two off of work and I was sitting at home watching, it was WFN at the time. I don't know what it is now, but but the World Fishing Network and I was kind of like sitting there watching that and I was thinking, oh man, like with the people that we know, we could enter this space and do it like really well, right? Because we're very much with a lot of the stuff that we do. Not only do we like big visuals, but we like to tell stories too, right? Like it's not just kind of like fish porn and that type of stuff. Like that's there, but we like to tell stories as well. And so it was that where I was sitting there and I was watching it, and there was a lot of like, most of what I was watching was kind of like, you know, it was kind of like glorified infomercials to me, where it was like, you know, I'm fishing here with Billy Bob from Billy Bob's Worm Factory, and
sorry to laugh,
today
but
we're
yes,
like, yeah, right. And so there was a lot of that on there, and I was like, I said to my brother, I called him up, and I was probably like totally hopped up on pain meds, but I was like, you know what, we can do this, like we could do like a, you know, a fly fishing television show, and we could do it without the rubs. You know, we could do it just with like maybe like product placement rather than like actually. And so in that way, we'd be like creating this experience for people where they could just like, they could become lost in the experience that we're having. And he's like, oh, that's a good idea. And again, with my brother, he's a risk taker, right? And so basically like the next day he was on the phone to, you know, like some heavy hitters, right? Like Patagonia and like different companies like that, and saying, hey, this is our vision. What do you guys think? They're like, we're in, like, let's do it. And so that's kind of like how we got into like film space essentially is like kind of through the IF4 and through television and kind of just the contacts that we had and then just wanting to do it maybe a little bit differently, right? Like, and I'm not saying that we were the first or anything like that, but I'm saying that we were willing to take some chances. Yeah. And see what people responded to, and really it's a chance, but it's not always a chance, right? If you understand kind of like you know, common kind of human nature and how people like respond to things and stuff, then you know, as fly anglers, like for example, like cover shots, right, for our magazine, like before we came along in Fly Fusion, it was like everything that I saw on a cover was a grip and grin. It was all big fish, and the bigger the fish, the more magazines you sold. And we came along and we're like, you know what? I respond well to things in fly fishing that aren't just grip and grin. Like, I mean, I love the grip and grin. I love like that final kind of like, yeah, this all came together and it worked out. But like I respond to like kind of different aspects of the beauty of fly fishing. And so we were willing to like work with photographers and go, you know what, this would be cool on the cover, right? Maybe let's do like a tight shot of a fly or a tight shot of a fly in a fish's mouth, or, you know, a trout's mouth, or let's like really focus in on the eye, right? Like let's focus in on that. Right. And so we started to do that, and people responded to that. So anyways.
No, that's awesome. I love that. Yeah, I mean, it was really a time of just like needing innovation because of the bill dances and everybody, you know, like there was a formula to fishing content.
That's
right. I think when, you know, Fly Fusion came out and started to do some of that stuff, it was definitely well received. You know?
Big time. Hence,
just more
the inception of SoFly. We were definitely inspired by Fly Fusion, 100%.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, certainly the IF4. I remember going to the IF4 when I first moved to Toronto in 2009. Or maybe it was Drift Outfitters really started, you know, hosting them in not like we got to we got a screen at the fly shop. You know, they rented a theater,
a
movie theater
right?
downtown Toronto.
Yeah.
Just the best.
You know, playing next door was like a Marvel movie, and then there was the IF4. You know, so like. And they sold out 2 viewings. Like this was like 350 people coming to see fly fishing films in Toronto. And I'm
so
like,
fun.
I remember coming and being like, I can't believe this.
Yeah.
In a good
In a
way.
good way,
I'm
yeah.
like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
You
I know, like,
this is awesome.
Like we would, so normally, well, we tried to, I think we normally premiere it at like a fly fishing exposition type thing, maybe in like Pleasanton or wherever. But then in Canada, a lot of times we'll premiere it in like Calgary, and we'll like there'll be multiple like sold out screenings in a big theater.
Amazing.
And it's like,
amazing.
and you're
so
just
cool.
like, oh my goodness, it's like to be part. And sometimes there's like, there's like famous politicians that fly fish that show up, and you're just like, oh, this is exciting.
Yeah, it's a thing.
Yeah, right.
That's cool.
And so it's
a
really
thing.
cool. And then too, like so there's the visual aspect of it, but then there's also the community aspect of it too, right? Where
Totally.
I absolutely love where we're at, like kind of culturally and technology wise, where I can listen to a podcast while I'm driving, or I can go and buy a magazine or have one show up at my house, or I can like go onto YouTube and like find like a whatever fly I want to tie. Like I can do all of that right now. But I think that one of the kind of things that like IF4 kind of fulfills too, other than just kind of like big visuals, is that we can do that together, right? Like we can get together in a theater and kind of like, hey, there's Joe, and I haven't seen Joe like for 6 months or whatever, and here we all are together, and then so there's that, and then when a big fish like jumps on screen or like takes a dry on screen, and you kind of like get that collective like kind of right, or gasp or whatever. There's something about that's that kind of community where you're like okay, right, like we all kind of like we all experience that, we're all going for that, right? And so we all identify with that, and there's something exciting about that too, right? So
100%.
Yeah,
Totally
that is cool.
Okay, Last Summer on the Sage. Here's the book if you're watching on YouTube.
It's a book for Yilma.
Is this your first book?
What's
First book
that?
by you? Is this your first?
This is my first. Yeah, it's my first foray into. Thank you.
So
yeah.
exciting.
Yeah, it's my first. Thank you. Wow, this is amazing. I want to come on your podcast all the time. It just feels so good.
Works for us.
No, it's my first kind of foray into like outdoor / wilderness fiction, which is I have to say, like, I kind of battled against it for 7 or 8 years. Like I had the story kind of bouncing around in my head, and I fought against it for about 7 or 8 years because, being in the fly fishing industry, what sells, right? Like, kind of like what people are interested in. And people want like a lot of information and knowledge right now, and kind of like to go, to put a lot of time into like something that's more artistic, like a fictional novel. It was like, okay, should I be doing this, number one, because is it going to sell? And then am I the best person to do it? And I kept thinking, there's people that are like way better than me that could write something like this, right? But then I started to think, like the thought never went away, I guess is what I'm saying. The thought never went away. And I don't know if you guys are at a stage in life where you kind of have these like little dreams or little glimpses of things that you want to accomplish. And as like dads or wherever we're at in life, we're like, anyway, for me, it was like, I would always push it to the side. But then I found like there was a part of myself that was kind of withering up. And I don't know if you guys identify with that, but there was like a part of myself that was kind of like,
I do.
like,
Atrophying.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
like
totally.
that part of yourself that's like, okay, you've got one life to live, and there's this idea that's kicking around in your head, and you're either going to do something about it or you're not. And I find that the more that I didn't do things about that there was part of myself that was dying. And so
yeah, that's great.
Right? Yeah. And
Yeah,
so
I mean, I think that, like you said, like you're like, is it going to sell or should I do it? I mean, it's like, there's two different things, right? You know?
exactly.
Like, should you do it?
Exactly,
Yeah, you should do
Mitch.
it. Yeah.
100%. And so it was like, so finally I was just like, you know what? I'm going to sit down and I'm going to start to, storyboard it. I'm going to put it on a plot arc, and it's got some, and I don't know how much of it, like how much you've read of it now, Mitch, but it's actually got parallel plots. So it actually starts out in the classroom, and it's
sorry, can I interject for half a second?
Yeah.
Maybe for people who haven't read it or just our listeners who aren't familiar, what is a quick synopsis?
Oh yeah, sorry. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's
yeah.
good. And then we'll get into what the parallel plots.
Yeah.
Let's put a pin in the parallel plots.
Right, and then yes, thank you. Yes, thank you for reeling me back. Yes.
Hey, that's our only thing. Yes.
The synopsis. The synopsis is this. It's a coming of age novel. So the main character is kind of like 17, 18. He's grown up in kind of like small town. It could be small town anywhere. This happens to be kind of small town Rockies. He's grown up. He's heading off to university, and so it's his last summer fishing kind of the river that's nurtured him. That's been part of all of his pastime. Like that's what he does. Is he goes, and when he's not in school and when he's not working to make money for university, he's out fishing. He's out fly fishing this stream, and it's called the Sage. That's why it's called Last Summer on the Sage. And so really, it's a story about kind of the people and the experiences that he has in his last summer fishing that river, thinking because he's young, he doesn't understand that maybe one day he'll be back. He just thinks when he heads off to university that'll be it, right? Yeah. And so he's trying to make the most of that last summer that he has, and not to give away too much of the novel, but one of my very favorite characters in the novel, which is really funny. It sounds really funny because obviously the protagonist or the main character should be my favorite character, but one of my favorite characters in the novel actually became a character named Jack, who's very much a recluse. He's very much secluded or distanced himself from culture or society because of just some baggage that he was carrying around. And he has this little cabin on the Sage River that nobody has ever stumbled across, essentially. And and I don't want to give away too much, so I won't. But anyways, Ryan, that's one of the people that Ryan kind of stumbles across, kind of very accidentally through the novel. And I love their relationship because what happens is that in Ryan's youthful naivety, he kind of reclaims some of Jack's belief in humanity, in the goodness of humanity, right? But then as Jack kind of begins to start to feel like maybe humanity does have some worth again, that Ryan is also learning kind of from Jack's just infinite knowledge of the river that he's fishing, that he's fished his whole life, and he's learning so much more from Jack. And so it becomes this wonderfully reciprocal kind of in different ways type relationship. And it's just, it turned out to be one of my absolute favorite relationships in the novel. But anyways, there's lots of action in it too. So it's not just kind of slow moving, kind of an old guy and a young guy having conversation, although there is lots of that on the river. There's some philosophical conversations because Ryan wants to know more about direction in life, and so there's that, but there is also lots of kind of action-y parts in the book as well, where kind of the antagonists or the villains in the novel, as you would say, which I'm safe to say this on your guys' podcast because this is a fly fishing podcast, but the villains in the novel are bait chuckers, right? Who sit under under this bridge, and
it's awesome,
right? And so
yeah, love it.
So, anyways, there are these bait chuckers that sit there, and so they end up kind of causing a lot of problems for Ryan and his best friend Nick and his sister, Nick's sister, who ends up becoming kind of a love interest. And so, really, anybody that's ever been 17 or 18 and kind of had a relationship and thought it was like the best relationship in the world because it's the first time that you had a relationship like that.
Yep.
You'll love this novel. If you love fly fishing, you'll love this novel. If you love kind of like philosophical conversations about life, you'll love the interaction between Jack and Ryan. So there's lots of touch points in it. If you want to nerd out on fly fishing a little bit, there's kind of like nerdy spots too, right? Where it's like, basically Ryan's summer follows a hatch chart, and so it's like, so he knows when the stone flies are first coming off, that's opening season, and that's when he needs to get out there. And he knows that, on the opposite end of that when hopper season arrives, that his summer's coming to an end.
Summer's
right?
over.
Yeah, that summer's over,
yeah.
and he's going to be heading off to university. He has no clue when he'll be back. And so there's all of that works in the novel, or that kind of goes in, and it's very much, there's two plots in it. So back to we'll take the pin out now,
I love. Just
sorry.
as a bridge, I mean, I love like the themes. I think you picked a really good, it's a great idea because coming of age book based around like, a young person's, last time fishing their river before they go to college. You say like they don't realize they can go back, but it's like kind of like they kind of can't. It's like that last summer where you fish the river before you go to college. Like you don't really come back the same.
Yes.
So there is something really beautiful about that. I think it's super relatable.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah,
and way to pick up on that, Mitch, because it's like, because you're right, we don't, the older we get, with kind of like, whether it be work stresses or driving kids around to, and which is a good thing, driving kids around to soccer and baseball and basketball, all those things, going back means something entirely different, right? Like summers in your teens, they're like, there are these endless, they seem endless, and it's like, and everything seems like it's the biggest and the coolest thing in the world.
Yes,
right?
totally.
Do you know what I mean? And so when you hook a fish, that you didn't think you could catch, you're just like, that becomes a story for an entire week. Like everybody that you talk to, like, oh, I caught this fish. And when you finally get up enough courage to actually ask a girl out, and she says yes, you're just like, you can't even believe it, right? You're just like, oh, she actually like likes me, right? Like, and she wants to go out with me. So there's that, but it all kind of centers on fly fishing, right? And so it's like, I totally don't want to give away too much, but but that's that's the gist of it.
Yeah. You said fiction though. I know. I feel like there's a bit of autobiographical kind of points,
awesome. That's an awesome pickup. There is like a lot of the stories in there's one story in there, and Mitch, after you've read through it,
I'll pick it out. I'll tell you.
You'll pick it out. There's a phrase, and I don't know what your guys' podcast is rated, so I'll just call it. I think it's called Peyronie's.
Extremely explicit. Actually.
Okay.
Yeah, like we put an explicit. I swear all the time. I'm sorry. I worked in restaurants. It's just awful. It's just awful. I can't even. I don't even know what's happening most of the time.
So you get to this one spot where there was where. Actually, I can't really say it. It'll give away too much. But anyways, there's something called Peyronie's disease, and it's mentioned in the novel. And Peyronie's disease has to do with how shall I say it? Like, are you guys PG or PG-13 or what are you guys at?
We're explicit.
R.
So
okay, so we're good.
R,
So it's an erectile
dark.
it's an erectile dysfunction. And
ED.
Nice. Yelmano. Fly fishing after dark.
The last cast. Welcome to the last cast with Mitch Doosley. Today we're talking about Yilma's ED.
I feel like
will his dry fly fishing fix it?
I feel like one of you guys needs to name a fly ED.
Yilma's ED.
It doesn't catch any fish.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Is that the version? Oh no, never mind. I was going to make a trout sandwich.
Anyways, there's a. Yeah, I feel like we could keep going off of that joke that you just said, which is start to talk about certain fly tying materials and stuff. But anyways, back to the novel. I feel like it's safer if we head back there. But anyways, so there's one part in there you'll pick up on it. But yeah, so there's a character in there who has who the doctor thinks has that because of an event that's happened to him. And yeah, that was when I was, it was probably 17. I was driving out to a lake with my buddy and I didn't fish with this guy all the time because he was one of those guys who was I don't know how to say it. I won't say his name, but he was one of those guys that was a limited time kind of guy. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's
right.
Yeah. Whereas
it's I gotta go now.
Exactly.
You get there and 20 minutes later, he's like, well, I'm...
Yeah.
Got this other thing going on.
Yeah. So, he always kind of if he was in a boat with you, he always wanted to debate something rather than just fish. And if he was he was always getting angry at other people around and you're just this is kind of embarrassing, right? I'm just here to fly fish, right? And so he was just one of those guys. And anyway, so somehow I think I was probably going with a bunch of guys and he got stuck in my vehicle. And he's like, oh, pull over. I need to pee. And I'm like, okay. And so I pulled over, but he didn't want to pee. He I feel like maybe you might have to edit this out, but he didn't want to pee. He grabbed his pellet gun. So I was probably 17 at the time. He grabbed his pellet gun and he hung it out the window, the pellet gun out the window. And he shot this horse that was urinating and he shot it. He aimed for that area and that horse went straight up and just started running away. Anyways, I'm just what are you doing? Cool. Anyways, there's one portion of the story that it has nothing to do with a horse, but it has everything to do with somebody getting shot with a pellet gun.
That's insane. It's just cruelty.
That really rabbit trailed. I'm sorry. You guys might have to edit that out. I'm sorry.
No, I don't know if I want. I'm that's the weirdest fishing story.
Isn't it the weirdest story ever?
One of the things I've ever heard.
That might be a new segment on the show. What's your weirdest fishing story?
What's your weirdest fishing story?
Man.
Yeah, I was driving to the river one day with this guy that had said he had to pee, and then he actually just shot a horse in the dick. It's what? It's okay.
I love your summary of that story. That's that's the best summary of the story.
You're like time out. You drove a guy. What?
I know.
So weird.
I know. As I'm telling the story, I'm looking at your guys' reactions, and I'm I don't know if I should stop or if I should keep going. I don't know.
Mitch is loving it.
Mitch
is keep going.
Yeah, I'm loving it. You said something interesting earlier. You're like, oh, I really loved the relationship. That happened in this book, and I kind of curious to know, was that a surprise to you? Obviously you storyboard and you have sort of an idea in your head, but maybe as you're writing, things sort of evolve in your own brain, and you ended up loving this relationship. And was that maybe non-intentional, or were you surprised by that?
Yeah, fabulous, absolutely fabulous question. So it was intentional, to do what I was going to do with Jack's character, but as far as creating plot arcs, that doesn't have the plot arc doesn't have the actual dialogue, right? The actual interaction between characters. And so when the interaction started to happen between characters, that's when I'm just oh my goodness. That's when I started to fall in love with Jack's character because and I'll give a little bit of background too on Jack's character, and this is not kind of 14A or anything. This is dialing it back here. So, but I think one of the reasons too, and that I kind of fell in love with Jack's character is because Jack's character is kind of it's loosely based on two people in my life, but mainly but one that I'm kind of comfortable talking about, and it's I don't know if you guys have had people in your life where, as you're growing up, where you wanted to kind of insert yourself a little bit, but you felt like you couldn't because you felt like maybe you're too young. That was like that for my grandfather, one of my grandfathers. where there was a little bit of family upheaval that happened, and his name was Jack. So, and his name was Jack, and there was a little bit of family upheaval that happened. So essentially, I didn't meet my grandfather until I was about kind of 17-ish, like in that range. And it was, and one day, my mom had said that my grandfather that he had a cabin up on this lake, at the end of this lake. And I used to go up to the lake kind of that was close to it and fly fish sometimes. And so one day I thought to myself, I was just like, I don't care what's kind of happened kind of family wise. Like, I'm just going to go up and knock on his door. Like, I'm going to find his cabin and knock on his door.
Yeah.
And so I did. I packed up early from fishing that day, and I drove like all the way up to the next lake. And there was actually a group of cabins at the end of this lake. And so I started knocking on some different doors. And I think it took kind of about 2 or 3 doors before somebody was like, "Oh no, yeah, Jack, he's just over in that cabin over there." And so I remember walking up to the door, and I remember thinking like kind of having this like pre-planned speech in my mind about what I was going to say to somebody that I had essentially never met before, right? And so I walked up to the door, and I had this speech in my mind already, and I knocked on the door, and when the door opened, there was like this 70 or 75-year-old man that was a spitting image of myself staring back at me. And all I could say was, I looked at him and I went, "Hey," like that. Like I just said, "Hey," like that's all that came out, right? Like one of these kind of life-changing kind of events, and all that comes out is kind of like, "Hey." And he looked at me, he kind of like looked at me, and he kind of did the, "Hey," like, and then he went, and then there was kind of like this uncomfortable kind of like 2 or 3 seconds of nothing. And then he went, "Yeah, you're going to have to refresh my memory. I don't know who you are." And I went, I said, I'm Derek. I said, "I'm your grandson." And he went, "Oh," and he said, "Come on in." And then he invited me in, and we probably talked for 2 or 3 hours, where he was like, he wasn't like, he was kind of like, I put him in like the grumpy old man category, where he was kind of like unhappy about, politics and this, prime minister, and kind of like he was unhappy about a lot of stuff, but it was entertaining. He was an entertaining guy. And I remember having that conversation, and then I remember leaving that day, and there was actually a few other times where I went up and visited him at his cabin. But I remember kind of leaving that day and thinking, Jack is a fly fisherman, and I've never fly fished with him. And that kind of like, that struck pretty deep in me, because I think anybody that's fly fished, who has family that fly fish, it's like, when I go home, like back to my hometown, like I'm there to fish with my brothers and my dad, right? Like that's why I'm there, or to fish with like lifelong friends. Like that's why I'm there. Right. And so to have somebody who like could have been very instrumental kind of in my life, and that wasn't there, I kind of look back on that and go, oh my goodness, I wish that there was more there. Right. And so in fiction, I was able to do that. And I was able to create a relationship, that kind of like in my mind allowed for not only Jack's character to kind of like, to be like a character of like, redemption, for lack of a better word. Like, we do, like, I think as humans, we're drawn to kind of like redemption stories, like the Green Mile and stuff like that, right? Where we like kind of like, we like somebody whose life is maybe in pieces a little bit, but that ends up coming back together, right? And so with Jack in the novel, that's very much kind of what happens, and it was very, I don't know, as an author, it was very cleansing for me to be able to do that, because like I say, it's not just my grandfather that represents. There's actually, a few people in my life who in my kind of youthful idiocy, or just not understanding kind of the fullness of life, not realizing that just being a person, regardless of how old you are, just being a person and just spending time with people, it makes a difference in everybody's life. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So anyway, so that's kind of Jack's character. And Aldo, great question. about kind of like why did Jack's character kind of become kind of a character that I fell in love with, but that's kind of why. I would say that's maybe too much of background into why, but yeah.
No, I mean,
it must be really,
no, we have to unpack that, for sure.
Must be really nice to just be able to sort of just like have these reflections, you know, on if you, when you do inject like elements of your own life into the book, you can kind of just like let that kind of you know flow, and as you write it must be really nice.
And Mitch, it's freeing, right? It's very freeing
yeah.
to be able to, and I've often thought about that too, like why fiction, right? Like why not just tell a real story? But it's, I think that what fiction allows us to do is it allows us to explore areas that maybe we wouldn't want to naturally go, or maybe we do want to see, you know, a story come together that hadn't come together, or you know, I think that there's certain elements of fiction that allow us to do things that we can't do that we might kind of have an underlying desire to do, and that reaches kind of different people at different levels, right? Like I can't tell how old you guys are just by kind of looking at you, and I don't expect you to kind of like be like, oh, I'm like 35, but
well, I'm like 35. Exactly.
I'm 40. And Mitch is 29.
Mitch is 29. But I can remember sitting like in the theater in 1993, I think, when A River Runs Through It came out, and just being so like absolutely taken by the cinematography and the story, and just being like so drawn into it, where I felt like there were portions of my story that were being told right in front of me. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, that's what good art does. That's what good, and I'm not saying that my book is good. I'm not saying that at all, but I'm saying that's what good art does. And that's what, you know, good
of course.
Fiction does, right? Is it allows us to kind of get drawn into that and maybe get a little bit lost in it, right? So
it's the lost part of it.
And get into the emotion and everything else. 100%. Yeah, I love it. It's awesome.
Nice.
How long did this book take you to write? Did this one just like flow through you, or was it like kind of took a little, like, was it a longer process?
Yeah. It probably took me, I think it took me probably two summers to write. Yeah. So I would say kind of like 4 or 5 months. And then the editing process comes in, and then that takes another, the editing process takes a long time, right? Like originally, and you know, this is kind of like maybe behind the scenes stuff, but originally my antagonist, so the bad guys, the villains, were I had used kind of language that was maybe a little bit too harsh, kind of surrounding kind of like redneckology. And so the redneckology. So the editor asked me to dial that back, and so I had to go through the whole story and make sure that, you know, make sure that their actions were speaking louder than kind of like the narrator in the novel kind of like demonizing them. And so that took time to do, right? So in all, I would say, probably half a year, I think, like, as far as like actual like time put into it. Like, and normally, like, I have a writing routine where I get up in the morning, and I write for kind of, 2-3, depending on the day, sometimes 4 hours a day. And I just finished another novel too. It's not outdoor fiction, but I just finished another novel too. And so,
wicked.
Yeah. So I've kind of like got the bug now. So it's funny, right? Just back to the whole dreams and kind of like, I think once you kind of push through something and kind of go, no, this is kind of who I am and kind of what I want to do. Then it's like, you either push through it and you go, okay, maybe it was more the like the attraction of it that drew me to it. Or you're like, no, this is like what I want to do. This is who I am. And so then you just kind of like keep going.
You just kind of do it.
Yeah. And I found that, right? I found that very much. So yeah, anyways, it took a while. I would say like the whole process, took me years and years and years, because it's like, it was like, what did Pam say in The Office? Are you guys Office watchers?
Yep.
What did Pam say? Yeah.
British and
Pam said something in The Office.
American.
Oh, yeah. So you're like, you just one up me there. That was awesome. Yeah. So Pam in The Office said something about, basically like how many years it took her to get to gym, right? Like there's that one quote where she's just like, and she
Yeah.
was talking about all the years that it took her to get to her, and then she finished with, and you're like 15 steps away or something.
Yeah.
And that's kind
It's
of
like
what
always right there, but there's so much like emotional stuff to it.
exactly that.
you know.
Yeah, and I feel that with the novel too, right? Where it was like, you know, like I said, the story was there for years and years and years. But yeah,
And the wanting,
Yeah.
the wanting to write and then not writing, and then finally feeling like, okay, no, I'm going to do this, and then actually doing it.
Yeah.
And then editing it, and then
and I have like
and now promoting it.
well, exactly, yeah. They're
Yeah.
promoting it. I have
Yeah.
like on the inscription, I have like a few of my buddies that I grew up fly fishing with, and they're kind of I dedicated the book to them, and it was funny because I sent it to them. There's a few of them that I've lost touch with, and it was funny like getting kind of feedback. So they all like got back to me, which was really interesting because they didn't know I was writing the novel or it was even coming out.
Yeah.
And it was funny like them getting back to me because one of the guys like hand wrote me a letter.
Whoa.
And
That's
I'm like,
cool.
you know when the last time I got a handwritten letter was? Like
He cares.
I can't even remember.
He cares.
But he wrote
Yeah.
like
That's good. That takes it to another
this
level.
4-page handwritten letter about, you know, how much he
awesome.
appreciated the story and
cool.
then and the novel itself. And then one of my other buddies, like my best friend growing up, I just fished with him just over through the summer, and he said we had coffee together, and he said that he's read through the novel like 2 or 3 times now, and he appreciates kind of having because he can picture like some of those events in the novel
Right.
that we actually
Yeah.
lived through, right? Like
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyways.
It's like such a rewarding, fulfilling thing beyond just like, you know,
It's almost like
hey,
a
look,
shared
you know,
memoir.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, that's a nice
Yeah.
way to put it.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, Derek, we got 5 more questions for you. These are like we ask every guest on the show to
Okay.
like round out shows. And
Yeah,
they're not you know they're just kind of like your favorites and stuff like that.
Okay,
but
perfect. Yeah.
We're gonna ask you them right now. And we're gonna see what you say. Because these are Mitchie's Fishy's 5. That's what we call them, Mitchie's Fishy's 5.
I love that.
All right.
There's 5 questions,
First
and his name is
question.
Mitch. You know?
Yeah, we've really done a lot of thinking on this show.
Oh, I love your guys' dynamic. I absolutely love it. Like, it's so amazing.
I love it.
So great.
Okay, number 1 on Mitchie's Fishy's 5 is what is your favorite fish and why? If you had to
Okay.
pick a favorite fish, what would it be?
Oh, you're killing me, Mitch. That's like I don't know if I can pick a
it's a tough one.
favorite because if I define favorite by having like 3, then I could do that. But like, through the probably the West Slope cutthroat, with really close second, the bull trout.
It's hard to have a
Another
favorite.
close second, like summer on steelhead.
Nice.
Yeah. So
All that is great.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that.
Cutties, gotta love them.
oh
Nice.
man,
Yeah.
yeah, they're like when you're
Gotta love
throwing
them.
when
So
you're
beautiful.
throwing foam flies at them like at the beginning of the season, like a big stonefly pattern, and they're
just
coming
like-
up and crushing it. Psh, man,
That's cool.
Like it's exciting. It can be numbers too,
Never
right?
caught a
Like you're just
cutty.
catching lots of them, and
That's about to
That's
change.
about to
Mitch.
change, Mitch.
I know I've never
yeah.
never
Sorry, I
caught a
yelled
cutty,
there.
but we're
Sorry.
going to Montana next week, so
Well, you guys are going to
excited.
Montana next week.
These two.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
Our fall is super busy.
Awesome.
And we're
Packed.
super fortunate. But yeah, we'll be in
yeah.
Missoula,
Oblongata.
Nice.
in and around Missoula.
Nice.
Sorry.
Man, it looks amazing.
Sorry.
It's so cool.
This is so bad.
What'd you say?
It's over here cracking jokes.
Did you say
That was a
Missoula?
good
Apple?
dad
I
joke,
did.
though. That was a good
I'm
dad
about
joke.
the dad
man.
jokes because it's low hanging fruit. So what can I say?
Yeah, you stepped up and you knocked it out. I love that.
Nice.
Nice. I love that. Cutthroat, that's a great answer.
Thank
Love
Beautiful
it.
fish.
Beautiful fish.
Okay, number 2 is if you could fish anywhere in the world right now, where would you go and why? Assuming it's the best time of year to go to that place, like the fishing will be amazing.
Yeah. So there's a little stream that I fish in the Rockies that gets very, very little traffic. So I can't name it, but it gets very little traffic, and it's like this. It's a headwaters stream, and there are like really big trout in there, and the trout are difficult to catch. So it's a bit technical, and they're not only difficult to catch, but the casting is difficult because of all the trees and stuff.
Right.
And so like it makes a difference, like whether your tippet is 5x or 6x on certain days. It makes a difference whether what shade of green your flav is, your mayfly imitation is. Like these are all things that happen. It makes a difference whether you cast 6 inches from a log versus like an inch from the log, like all of that. And then to toss everything into that, there's also the danger of grizzly bears up in that valley. And so you're carrying your bear spray and you really feel like you're out there when you're fishing that. And it's, and I absolutely love that place. Like I've said to my boys and my wife, I've said, you know what, when I go, this is where I want my ashes spread. I want them up there. Yeah. That's the place. So I'll be up there all the time.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Grizzlies freak me out, but it does sound awesome.
I can picture it.
Yeah. Not to disparage any of our other guests, but usually it's like the Seychelles. It's like, no shit.
Yeah.
That's a really special answer. It's very personal.
Thank you.
Maybe the most personal answer.
Oh, thank you.
To that question.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it takes us into number 3, which is also going to be one of them's. What is your best or favorite, or one of your best or favorite fishing memories of all time?
Oh, best or favorite fishing memories of all time.
Tough one.
It's
a big question.
It's a big one
my mind is going do I go nostalgic? Do I go funny? Do I go what do I go? So I'll just pick best fishing memory of all time.
I got my BB gun out and
I love it.
Oh man, I would say probably, I don't know, anything to do with my brothers and my dad, going out. And so I don't know if I have just one kind of one memory, but anytime I get to go out with my brothers and my dad, it's I get a little bit emotional. I can actually feel it coming up right here, right? Just because, the older you get, the more you realize just how special it is to get out, with your dad. And my dad's he's getting close to his 80s now, and but he's the dad that goes and works out in the gym and stuff still. So he's he wants to carry on getting out with his sons, and he's not, it's not like we're having to, not go to this spot or not go to that spot because dad's coming along. No, he's hiking in there with us, and so any of those kind of memories in the last few years where dad's come along and gotten out there, those are my favorite, my absolutely favorite. Most memorable was the time that I almost got shot. I mean, other than the horse getting I almost got shot one time when I was fly fishing, which was really, really scary. But
by a gun?
Yeah, it was insane.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Same guy?
Yeah.
Same guy? Was it a horse guy?
Different guy.
Different guy.
Welcome to BC, you guys. Welcome to BC.
You're gonna have a great time. Lock and load.
You might not leave, but no. Anyways, it was this really remote stream. I was fishing all by myself.
Yeah.
And I could hear these gunshots going off in the distance, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of weird. And then I made a cast, and I heard this gunshot go off, and just a second or two later, a bullet ricocheted the rock, hit the rock right behind me.
Jesus.
That's
And I just was oh my goodness, what's happening? And so I jumped into the stream. I got across the stream. And then I went up the other side, and I went and found kind of where I could hear these gunshots coming from, and I went and found it. And there was just two guys target shooting high powered rifles.
Oh right.
But there wasn't a bank behind it. It was just a stand of trees, and they just assumed that the stand of trees would stop all the bullets, and one of them got through. Can you imagine?
That's crazy.
Oh my! All of a sudden, what would a news report on that look like, right? Like fly fishermen, like if my body was ever recovered and there was a bullet hole in it, and that's what
You'd be the new Tom Thompson.
right? Like, oh my goodness, like
People
that would
be
be
like,
such a crazy story,
How?
The mystery of Derek Bird.
right? Like, how did
Farmer's
this
like,
guy
I saw
die?
some aliens.
Yeah.
This huge conspiracy theory about
Yeah,
about
totally.
it was the editor of the Fly Fishing Journal. Like,
Yeah,
it's just like, you know.
Yeah, exactly. I love it.
Oh, man, that's scary. That is scary. I think about
was,
that sometimes, you know, like
Yeah.
like especially when you're out in the back of Ontario during
Yeah.
like turkey season or something. Like, should I be wearing orange? You know,
Right?
like, I don't
Yeah.
know.
And that's honestly
Yeah.
one of my worst fears is not actually getting shot when I'm out fishing, although that would be a fear, but like actually like
Especially now.
being right, but being like one of those fly fishermen that like stumbles across a dead body in the water, I've like
Yeah.
that's like one of my worst fears, like legitimately, because you hear about it every once in a while,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Anyways,
It'd be wild.
I mean, we grew up fishing the Ottawa River. You know, sometimes when you're snagged, you're like, and it started to move. You're like, oh man.
oh yeah, totally. Yeah.
Is this a
Really,
time? It's a
again?
hand.
Yeah, exactly. I love it. Okay, number four, Mitch's Fishes 5 is why do you fly fish? What do you get out of fly fishing?
ooh, so
Keep going back.
yeah, I'll try to give a short answer to this question, which is the older I get, the more I don't really know why, except that I just really love it. I think when I was in my 30s, I really tried to figure out why, you know, hunter-gatherer, or, you know, it's in my blood, or I said to my co-host, Jim McLennan and I, we were fishing together a couple weeks ago. I was out in Alberta and we were fishing, and it kind of came up with him, and I said to him, I said, maybe one of the reasons that we fly fish, because he's all, have you figured out kind of why you do this? And I said basically the same thing. The older I get, you know, I just kind of love it, right? And that's maybe enough for me now. It's just that I love it. But I said, I think I know why people like us do fly fish. I said, and it's likely because, like, my brain doesn't really have an off button, right? And it's like, even when I rest, I don't want to put my feet up. Like, when I rest, I still want to, like, I'm still trying to figure things out. And with fly fishing, it allows me to do that, right? But it's not super important, right? So I'm trying to figure it. And if I don't figure it out, oh, well, I'll be back the next day, and maybe I'll figure it out the next day, right? Or I'll figure it out and I'll feel like I'm on top of the world, right? I'll figure out kind of what, you know, what mayfly pattern to use, or what, you know, what stonefly pattern the fish are keying in on. But it's like, so it allows my mind to do what it naturally does, but in kind of a non-essential or an unimportant way. And it allows me to kind of like, to be, this one's kind of important to me, but it allows me to, or it reminds me that I'm just kind of part of what's going on, right? Like, I go out into nature, and I just get to be, I get to be one of the kind of, I get to just live. I get to be one of the creatures that's out there just interacting. And, you know, where I live, you know, it's so beautiful. Like, you know, in BC, you know, I'm standing below, you know, massive peaks doing it, and in kind of glacial fed streams. And, you know, it's like, oh man, like I can't not. And so that's an answer too. I have to.
Yeah, we hear that one a lot because I think everybody feels that.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's just like a weird impulse.
Can't not,
you know? Yeah.
It's fun.
Oh, I love that.
Right,
It's
yeah.
awesome.
Challenging.
It's fun.
Yeah, it's beautiful answers.
Yeah.
Okay, this one's fun. This is the last one, Mitch 55. I'm really stoked to hear what you say. If you were a fly pattern, what would you be? What fly pattern represents you best, and why?
And sometimes people answer this like, oh, the one I use the most is no.
Right.
It's like Derek Bird is a fly pattern.
Yeah.
Yeah, which one is it?
Which one is that?
Yeah.
Could be existing, you know?
Yeah. I think it has to be more of an oddball pattern. So it couldn't be like a, you know, woolly bugger. It couldn't be like a muddler. Or it couldn't be like a, you know, a kind of any type of minnow pattern. I think it has to be like kind of more offbeat, because that's my personality. I'm like, I'm an odd. I find myself odd in the way that that I have to be kind of like that my skill set, because because I write and I communicate, where I'm like I end up in front of the camera sometimes, or I end up kind of like. But I really don't like to be front and center, and so what fly would represent that? Probably some type of an emerger pattern, maybe, right? Where it's not like it hasn't gotten to where it's supposed to go yet.
A coming of
but
age.
It's still productive, right? So
That's
cool.
Good one,
yeah.
I like
so
that.
what a great question. I've been on a number of podcasts now. That's the first time
Yeah.
I've been asked that question. So nice job on the Mitch's Fishy Five.
We're
gonna trademark it. So
Yeah.
We also really want to do like a coffee table book of all the guests,
yes,
and
nice.
there'll be
Yeah.
this person's this fly, this person's this fly. Love our guests and
Yeah.
stuff. I don't know who would ever buy a coffee table book, but maybe.
oh, they will.
Who knows, right? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just do you want to make it or do you want to sell it? I just want to make it.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
like Mitch said,
exactly,
yeah.
right? This is
Yeah,
we just
yeah.
gotta
This is what
follow
we
through
have
with
to do.
it and see
Yeah.
what happens.
Just
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
to do it.
Yeah.
100%.
Nice.
I love it. Well,
Much like
that's the show, man. And you know what? Like we covered a lot of ground, and like it was
A lot of
really
ground.
great getting a chance to
Yeah.
just chat about your fishing life and fly fusion, the book, and
Oh,
everything. Thank you for coming on. It was
Yeah.
awesome.
Well, yeah, thank you guys for having me. And really, I absolutely love your guys' dynamic. Like, seriously, I mean,
thanks.
we could, kind of you three and kind of kind of hanging out and kind of I could totally do that at some point. Just invite myself along and be like, "Hey guys, I'm here." Type
you're
thing.
welcome.
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
Welcome
Right?
anytime.
But you guys have a
Careful what you wish for. 'Cause
Right?
we are going to be in your province.
Right,
and
that's right.
Yilma does love popping by. Just got to knock on the
It's like
window.
shows up at my door. I've got a coffee for you.
That's a
Yeah.
hell of a callback.
Oh man, but
Nicely done. Nicely done.
but I do love kind of what you guys do and just how you do it together. And I love that. I love that you guys are connecting with the community that you guys connect with. So keep doing what you're
Appreciate it.
doing. And you guys are so good at what you do. You're so good at what you do. The
Oh,
questions,
thanks.
The interaction. It was fun. I was a little bit nervous today to come on to I
Oh,
hadn't
come
done
on.
I hadn't done a panel yet. I hadn't done
Yeah.
kind of multiple.
Multiple people. Yeah.
Multiple people, and so I was like, oh, I don't know how that's gonna go, but oh my goodness, it was so fun, you guys.
Relaxed.
So yeah, keep doing what you're
Oh,
doing.
glad.
You guys are
Yeah,
awesome.
Thanks. I'm
we
glad. That's
appreciate
great.
that.
Thank
That's
you.
awesome, man.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Where can people?
Oh,
yeah,
took
find
the
your
words
book?
out of my mouth, Mitch. Took the words out of my mouth.
Promo time. Promo time.
Shameless
Where-
plugs.
Yeah.
Let's have them.
I
Let's
get to
hear
do
them.
that. Okay, yeah. So.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
So if you want to buy my book, Last Summer on the Sage, you can find it at flyfusionmag.com. And if you go, there's a little icon on there that says store, and you can click on that, and you'll find a bookstore on there. And there's a number of different books in there. Fusion Books has its own publishing division, and so
Oh, cool.
so you can find different books on there. And mine is Last Summer on the Sage. And so yeah.
Quick question.
Yes.
Do you guys want to publish a coffee table book about 110 minutes?
Yes, I will talk to my people. Yeah, the coffee table book about coffee tables. Oh no, sorry, that was a different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's Seinfeld.
Well, that's cool. I didn't realize. I didn't know. Sorry, I for part of the ignorance, I didn't know Fly Fusion had a publishing.
Yeah, well,
like
it's
our-
it's
yeah.
kind of like it kind of works with select people that it kind of this person would kind of be somebody we'd like to work with, and so they go out and they kind of target that audience, target those type of writers. Anyway, so and it's there's not a lot of books there. There's Jim McLennan, my co-host, he's got a few there, and now I have one there, and I suspect that there'll be more because they keep working with different authors. So
Very cool.
So so you can find it there, or if you want to, I always kind of say this, if you want to support Jeff Bezos and kind of his next trip to space, you can go ahead and get it on Amazon. Amazon.ca for you Canadian listeners, and for those of you that are listening from the States, go to Amazon.com. So you're not paying Canadian prices. And you can get it there. If you type in Last Summer on the Sage, Derek Bird, it'll pop up and you can get it there. And then if you want to connect with me, after you've read the book or something, if you want to drop me a line and just say whatever you want, you can find me on Instagram at Derek R. Bird. And I'm not super active on there. I have to admit I'm a bit of a Luddite in social media areas, but I'm at Derek R. Bird, And you could like,
Awesome.
yeah, if you want
I'm
to
not.
say something about the book, if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to be like, why did you include like these paintings on the cabin wall? Like, why did you include those? You're more than welcome to ask me. So
Awesome. And yeah, we'll put links to all those things in the show notes as well, so people can find it if you just go to the show notes. But that's amazing.
awesome.
And I'm the same as
Eric,
you on social.
Dude, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, are
That
you?
was awesome.
Yes. Kindred soul here. Yeah, nice.
Yeah, he's not a
Well,
big
he used to.
Instagram
He had
guy
to.
anymore.
He had to detox. Let's just,
He would use it for like 3 hours a day, and it was a whole thing.
Three,
We
like,
actually had an
maybe-
intervention. We were like,
Yeah.
you know what, you can't be.
Not true.
So now he takes pride in it. He's like, it was his
Yeah, he's like he
idea.
actually this is benevolent thing. We're like, Yilma, you have got to stop. Your hand is a phone.
Awesome. Derek, thank you so much for
Derek,
coming
it's
on.
awesome.
It was really, really fun to
Yeah,
chat.
nice
Yeah.
to meet you guys
Meet you
and
too.
chat with you guys.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me. Thanks so much for having me.
No, our pleasure.